Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our Visitors Edition for Purdue Week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. We're back in the big house for a night game against struggling Purdue. With us in a few minutes to get us up to speed on the visitors is Tim Newton, the radio play-by-play voice of the Boilermakers. We'll also hear a few cuts from Sharon's Monday presser. First, my view from Section 17 to get us going. I know most of you were just happy to get a win in East Lansing Saturday night, but weren't overly impressed with some aspects of the offense. Mainly the passing game. The running game was very good, but it is troubling we couldn't get more through the air against what was a very poor Spartan defense. I'm thinking the game flow had to be a big factor. It was anyone's game going into the second half. The run game was working, the defense was stopping them, so Chip decided we didn't need to throw the ball. It worked Saturday night, but we have a lot of work to do with the passing game. I think that's obvious. We looked one-dimensional, and one thing is certain, if we don't improve using a more balanced approach in the next 3 weeks, we could have a lot of problems in the season finale against you-know-who. The coaching staff is well aware of that, so expect to see Chip try and get Bryce more comfortable in the pocket and reading the defenses, and settle in more each of the next 3 games. He's so uber-talented, but he is only 18 years old, and his offensive line has 3 redshirt freshmen in front of him and some receivers who still are dropping too many passes. It is a work in progress. Purdue will give Chip the opportunity to work on that passing game. Their defense has been okay this year, but Michigan should be able to balance the offensive attack Saturday with more success, we hope. At his Monday presser, Sharon was asked about his 2 running backs and their very different styles.
Both of them have the ability, as we've seen, to have the explosive playability. I think, both of them can run you over, make you miss, do that. But I think Justice, we've just seen more of the, 50-yard runs, 60-yard runs where Jordan's only had a couple of them. And Jordan's really that thumper that wear you down back, that moves the pile, where Justice isn't that as much, but they both have that ability. So, the biggest difference is probably that, Jordan's more of that thumper guy, whereas, Justice is the one cut. He can bounce it outside and get that touchdown, or he can one cut and go for 50, but both of them obviously super successful in what they've been doing.
He also commented on the passing game issues against Michigan State.
I think it's two-part. There's some things in protection and coverage that we just didn't get synced right, but there were some passes in there that we were super successful on. The one to Andrew Marsh, there's a couple to Andrew Marsh. Even on the scoring drive in the third quarter, we threw a deep corner route to him that was wide open. So it wasn't necessarily all that. Also, the way the game was going, it became one of those games you get in a complimentary football game, the defense is playing well and stopping them, and you wanted to get some momentum. And especially in the third quarter, when you hit a 20-yard run, then another 20-yard run, it's hard to throw it there. So at that point, we did what we needed to do to win the game.
Sharon talked about the play of Jimmy Rolder on Saturday and said he's not surprised at all with how well he's playing.
I think the confidence with him really started in the spring, and it started way back then. It was just all about being healthy, and I think for him, it's the confidence that he has in the system and how he's practiced, how he's played, and that affected it. But Coach BJ's done an unbelievable job with that crew. But watching the film just confirmed what I saw on the field and what he's done the past couple of weeks. He's been unbelievable, and he keeps playing at a high level.
Our visitors on Saturday night are in rebuild mode, and that's putting it mildly. When Coach Odoms took over the helm this year, he was greeted by 58 players hitting the portal. That meant he had to do the same and bring in a lot of new faces. So it's been a tough first year on the job for he and his staff. Joining us next with his thoughts on that and more is the radio play-by-play voice of Purdue football, Tim Newton. So stay with us. Joining us on the show today as we get ready for a big Saturday night game with Purdue is Tim Newton, the radio play-by-play voice of the Boilermakers on the Purdue Sports Network. Tim, great to have you back with us.
Mike, thanks for having me.
Well, the Boilers are still looking for their first Big Ten win, Tim, and they came so close against Rutgers on Saturday. It really was a strange and heartbreaking kind of way to lose a game, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, and it was the second time in 3 weeks. Purdue lost a heartbreaker a couple of weeks ago against Minnesota, a game that they led for more than 50 minutes, and again had most of the lead on Saturday. Had a lead in the fourth quarter with 4.5 minutes to play, and really, though, you go back, Rutgers kicked a field goal in the last play of the game, but the game should have been over long before that. Purdue had a 10-0 lead in the first half, had all the momentum, took over a drive at the Rutgers 40 and came up empty. And then again in the third quarter, they had a 17-7 lead, had good field position, and another drive came up empty. So instead of pushing the score out to a 3-score lead, Rutgers was able to stay in it, and they made just enough plays down the stretch to come out with a win.
Well, Tim, it was just 2 years ago. Purdue was, in the Big Ten championship game, as we all remember well, against Michigan. Then Jeff Brom left for Louisville. Things didn't work out for the 2 years Ryan Walters was head coach. Now you have Barry Odom coming in from UNLV, where he did a pretty masterful job with that program. He's a solid coach, but this is a big-time rebuild he has on his hands, isn't it?
It is, and if you look at the roster construction, you can see that. They had 54 transfers in and 82 new players on this year's roster. And that's two-thirds of your roster that wasn't here last year. And he had a similar rebuild at UNLV, another place that's very difficult to win, and he was able to get things done there right off the bat. It's been a little bit tougher here. I think the schedule has played a little bit of a part in that, but I have full confidence he's the guy for the job, and I think it'll take a season or two until he can get things turned around. But it has been, I can tell you, a very, very frustrating stretch here with 6 losses in a row.
Oh, absolutely. And, it used to be common that a new coach had 3, maybe 5 years to build his program. It seems like coaches are maybe getting 2 years in the current environment, dropping like flies in the last few weeks. It's kind of mind-boggling for someone like me who's an old guy watching all of this take place. Would you say it's different at Purdue and Coach Odom is going to be given that time he needs to get things on track?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. There's no question that they will give him the opportunity here. The Ryan Walters experiment did not work. He was a first-time coach after being a defensive coordinator in a couple of stops, and it just didn't work here. And I think the athletic department felt that it was not going to work, and rather than go through more years of kind of running in place or having the program slide any further, they decided to make the change. But I think one of the things that has changed is, well, first of all, you have some insanity out there. When we're paying coaches $40 and $50 million not to coach, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
The other thing that's happened, though, is you have the Curt Cignetti issue, but where he was able to turn things around at Indiana, a place that has had even less tradition in football than Purdue has, and he was able to do it right away. And again, it was a perfect storm, scheduling, He was able to bring a lot of his players from James Madison. They got a lot of money in NIL before the revenue sharing thing changed in July. So there are a lot of things that happened. He's had great success. He's a great coach. He's got a great team right now. It will be interesting to see how sustainable that is over time. But I think that has put a lot of pressure on other programs in similar situations to try to have that miracle one-year turnaround. And it really does not usually happen that way.
No, it does not. Well, Tim, let's talk about this Purdue team we're going to see Saturday night in Ann Arbor and get to know them a little bit better. Starting on the offensive side, Ryan Brown is the starting quarterback. He's a Clarkston, Michigan kid. Tell us about him and what he brings to this Purdue offense.
He's a guy that has a lot of talent. We have to remind ourselves that he's still fairly young in terms of his football maturation. Assuming he starts on Saturday night, it would be his 11th start as a college quarterback. A great athlete. I think he's still learning in crunch time sometimes to make the right plays. He threw a pick six at the end of the Minnesota game with about 7.5 minutes to play that gave the Gophers their winning touchdown. He had a fumble, a bizarre play on Saturday with a minute left in a tie game. He threw a pass that was deflected back to him, and he ran with it and didn't put the ball away, and it got stripped, and then Rutgers wound up kicking a field goal. He's got the talent to make the throws. He's got good running ability. The one thing I think that you'll see with Ryan from time to time, he's a little bit indecisive. He sometimes you'll see him back in the pocket, and you can almost see the gears going as should I keep throwing the progressions here, or should I just tuck the ball and run? Whereas the guy that has his backup now, Malachi Singleton, probably a little bit better runner, and he's been able to make quicker decisions in limited time. So I'll be curious to see how they split the quarterback duties here the last 4 games. But Brown is the starter. And he's got the capabilities of putting up big numbers, but he's also still got some growing to do as a quarterback.
Yeah, as you said, he's just a sophomore, so it'll be interesting to see a local kid in the big house and how well he fares.
Yeah, I'm sure he's excited about it.
Well, I'm sure he is too, and his family. The rushing attack, though, is led by Devin Mockabee, who's a familiar name to us, one of the few guys left from last year's team. He has good numbers overall, over 500 yards rushing. Ryan Brown is the second leading rusher on the team. Is Coach Odom fairly pleased with what he's getting in the rushing game so far?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned those too, but they've also had a little bit of an emergence. Malachi Thomas has played more in the last few weeks. He's a transfer from Virginia Tech. He had a couple of big plays running and catching the ball on Saturday against Rutgers. And you'll even see a little bit of Antonio Harris, who they really like as a sophomore. Early on this season, Mockabee was carrying a lot. He had, I believe, 32 carries in one game. And Devin's not the biggest guy in the world, and he got a little bit banged up in that game. So they've tried to put him on a little bit more of a pitch count. So it wouldn't be surprising if you usually will see him they'll try to get him somewhere around 15 or maybe 20 touches in a game, whether it's on the ground or through the air. The running game, I think the running backs have done a fine job. The offensive line had not been doing a good job of run blocking until the last couple of games, and they seem to have picked that up. Now, it'll be interesting to see with Purdue's gauntlet here in November, where you have Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, and Indiana. Those are going to be 4 tough teams to move the ball against, so we'll see how effective that ground game is.
Well, and you mentioned Coach Odom. He's known to be a guy who likes to build his teams from the inside out, starting with the trenches, of course, on both sides of the ball, and that takes time. Maybe not as much with the portal these days, but it still takes time at that position. How would you describe the offensive line play overall through the first 8 games?
I would say you'd probably have to give it maybe a B- or a C+ average. They've done a decent job in pass blocking. I think Ryan has had good time to throw, and the sacks are probably about where you would think they would be. Up until, like I said, the last couple of games, the run blocking has not been great. I thought we would see a little bit more depth this year on the offensive line. I mean, basically they've gone with 6 guys. They've had the same left tackle, left guard, center, and right tackle for most of the season. They made a change at right guard, switching guys around a little bit, but for the most part, it's been 6 guys. that have been doing most of the work up there. And I would say, again, average, but I think they were hoping for a little bit more out of that offensive line this year.
Well, Michael Jackson is the third, has 44 grabs and leads the team in receiving. Then statistically, at least, there's a big drop-off in production, isn't there, Tim?
There is. And I think if you were going to look at the disappointing aspects this year, the receiving corps certainly, I think, would have to be in that category. A lot of drop passes, and they had two crucial ones last week against Rutgers that might have turned the game around had they not happened that way. Jackson has been he's a slot receiver. He's their possession guy. So you look at his averages, he leads the team in receptions, but he's only averaging about 9 or 10 yards a catch. They do have guys that have downfield ability. We saw Corey Smith catch a deep touchdown pass earlier this year. Nitro Tuggle has big playability, but again, inconsistencies. And I think the one thing that they've really missed this year, their tight end, their best pass receiving tight end, George Burhan, has been out since the Notre Dame game. He had an injury with his arm. He had to have surgery. He won't play again this week. They're hoping to get him back, but they really don't throw the ball very much at all to the tight ends. And I think that's a weapon that you'd like to be able to see utilized a little bit more.
Well, the offense is averaging, I think, 22.9 points per game through the first 8 games. And this is usually the point in any season where you see your offense is peaking or making strides. Are you seeing that with this offense, Tim?
It depends on what day of the week you ask, and it depends on which track. They came out for instance, they came out Saturday and looked like a house of fire. And they've been a better team scoring in the first half usually than the second half, although last week they did come up with a couple of touchdown drives. I don't know if I would say peaking. It's been maddening inconsistency. I do think that. I think, you look, last year's team just didn't have much offensively that they could build around, and it never really seemed to take off. This team, you mentioned they're averaging in the low 20s. You feel like if you watch them play, they should be in the 30s. Because it seems like every week they're leaving points on the field. Mm-hmm. The turnover margin is at minus 10 coming in. I think it's now minus 11 because of the late fumble by Brown last week. One of the worst teams in the country in terms of turnover margin. So penalties, turnovers, it's kind of with this offense, it's been one step forward, 2 steps back a lot of the season.
Over on the defensive side, Purdue didn't have one starter returning for new DC Mike Scherr, who also came over with Coach Odom from UNLV. What can you tell us about this Purdue defense that we're going to see Saturday night?
I would say probably the strength of the defense is at the linebacker core, and he's got a couple of transfers that he brought with him from UNLV, Charles Correa and Manny Powell. They will probably be among the leading tacklers. Alex Sanford is another transfer. He's the other starting linebacker. The best defensive lineman they have right now is a guy named C.J. Nunley. At least he's the best pass rusher. He's a transfer from Akron. He was an all-first team selection in the Mid-American Conference and wanted to take one shot at the Big Ten, and he's really come on as the season has gone. They've got a good interior lineman in Jamarian Harkless, whose nickname is Chops, and he's I think he goes about 6'2" or 6'3" and 345 pounds, so He's a load in there. The big issue really, though, with this defense has been the secondary, and we saw last week Rutgers had a receiver, KJ Duffett, caught 6 passes for 241 yards, including a 72-yard touchdown pass where he didn't have a defender within 10 yards of him. It's been very inconsistent at the cornerback spot. Miles Slusher, who had been one of their better players at safety, was out last week with an injury. They're hoping to get him back. But again, just like the offense, at times the defense will flash. And they had a number of sacks last week against Rutgers, and yet they gave up 543 yards in offense. And it's hard to win football games doing that.
Yeah, the defense is giving up 27 points per game so far this year. But, I've noticed they've produced 19 sacks so far, which is pretty darn close to Michigan's sack numbers. So even though it's been a tough season for the D, there have been some positives to build on, haven't there?
There have been. A lot of those sacks have come off blitzes. They've had a hard time sometimes getting home with the 4 guys up front. So we saw last week Hershey McLaurin, for instance, one of their safeties came up with a sack as he blitzed from his safety spot. But the problem there, of course, is you are vulnerable to the big play if you don't get to the quarterback. But yeah, the quarterback sacks and even the tackles for loss have been okay. It's just it's maddening. They play well on first down, play well on second down. You get a team 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 9 or whatever, and they give up a pass play or give up a penalty. And it's, Northwestern was able to control the ball on them a couple of weeks ago and in a 19-0 win. At one point, Northwestern had run 27 plays and Purdue had run 3. And that's kind of the typical of the inability sometimes of this defense to get off the field.
Well, Tim, what do you think this Purdue team can and needs to do if they're going to hang around and give themselves a chance on Saturday night?
Well, first of all, you can't turn the ball over. And I think they're going to have to force some Michigan turnovers to have any chance to stay in the game. Ryan Brown is going to have to make good decisions. I am concerned about Purdue's ability to stop Michigan's offense. You've got a very mobile quarterback and 2 really good running backs, and we know how talented and athletic the receivers are. It's a game that you feel like Purdue's going to have to score at least in the 20s, if not the 30s, to win. And we've only seen them do that a couple of times this year. So I think it's going to take, and Michigan's going to have to help a little bit. They're going to have to give the Boilermakers some help. But I will say this. I think Barry's teams have played hard the first 8 games. I couldn't say that necessarily about last year's team. I thought that there was a little bit of a white flagging as the season went on. This team has been more competitive. I thought Saturday was actually one of their more competitive efforts. But it's going to be tough with these last 4 games coming up. You got the number 1, 2, 21, and 28 teams in the country that you're going to play. And that's not the way you want to be looking at November with a 2-6 record.
No. And final question before we let you get away, Tim, sort of coming off that. The schedule maker was not friendly to Purdue this year. I couldn't believe it when I looked at the schedule last week and thought, you got to be kidding me. I mean, I don't know anyone in the Big Ten that's closing with a schedule like that. I mean, as you said, after Michigan, the Boilers have Ohio State at home, travel to Washington, so you've got the 2 time zone game, and then close with rival Indiana. I mean, that is absolutely a murderer's row and asking a lot for a young rebuilding team that you'd like to see improvement from, isn't it?
It is. And they added to the misery a little bit with themselves. They had scheduled Notre Dame, so they had an early non-conference game at Notre Dame. It's difficult. You look at the 26 schedule, I think it's a little bit more manageable. But really, I think what we thought coming into the season was it would be defined by October, because there were 4 games in October. You had Illinois, Minnesota, Northwestern, and Rutgers. And those are 4 games that you feel like you could compete in, and you should have been able to take at least 1 or 2 of those games, and instead you go 0-4. So now you've really put yourself behind the 8 ball. I do think you asked earlier about patience. I do think that it's not a patient world, but I think that people realize that Barry Odom has done this before. I think he's got some goodwill built up here in the community that they will give him a chance. And right now it's just, what positive can you take out of this month that you can build on for 2026? And that's really what you're looking at.
Absolutely. With us today as we get ready for a big Saturday night game in the Big House has been Tim Newton, radio play-by-play voice of the Boilermakers on the Purdue Sports Network. So, Tim, it's great to have you back on the show with us. I know it's been a tough go for the Boilers so far this year. Hopefully better times ahead, but we thank you for being on the show with us and look forward to another visit during happier times in the future.
Well, the future is in front of us, as they say, and it's I think it's going to be a lot better. But thank you for having me today.
On Quick Hits today, Sharon said Rod Moore is still trying to get his knee ready for more reps. He had no comment on whether he'd be ready for Purdue. He also said Cole Sullivan was working his way back. No answer as to when he would be ready. We'll hopefully have some more updates later in the week. On Thursday's Michigan Game Day show, our guest will be Trevor McHugh from On3's Maize and Blue Review. We'll also have the latest team news, game day notes of interest, and a peek at the weather for Saturday night. So make sure you join us. That does it for now. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until we meet again on Thursday, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!